If you've been around this channel long enough, you've probably caught on by now that I'm a giant JoJo's Bizarre Adventure fan. I've spent more time than I'd like to admit diving into its world, rewatching parts, debating favorite arcs, and even trying to justify why some of the strangest stands actually make sense if you think about it hard enough. But out of all of the JoJo's, there's one I keep coming back to, JosephJoestar. When Hirohiko Araki introduced Joseph in Battle Tendency, it felt like he was deliberately tearing up his own rulebook. After Jonathan's noble, stoic presence in Phantom Blood, Araki swung hard in the opposite direction, crafting a hero who was mouthy, unpredictable, and constantly rewriting the fight as it happened. The moment he shows up in Battle Tendency, Joseph feels different. He's wild, he's loud, he's pulling out clackers and Tommy guns like that's a normal way to fight vampires. Then decades later, he strolls back into Stardust Crusaders as an older man, and somehow he's just as magnetic. Still quick on his feet, still turning every situation into something only JosephJoestar would think of. The brilliant idiot, the prankster hero, the Joestar who managed to turn every fight into something unforgettable. Consider this a dive into why JosephJoestar has been stuck in my head ever since I first watched him. When JosephJoestar burst onto the screen in Battle Tendency, it feels like the entire series tilts. Up to this point, JoJo had given us Jonathan, again the noble stoic gentleman hero, and then here comes Joseph, scarf flying, mouthing off to cops, cheating at cards, and smashing a bottle over a thug's head before the opening credits scenes even settle. He felt like a complete reinvention of a Joestar. From the start, Joseph is unpredictable in the best way. He's smart, but it's a kind of streetwise trickster intelligence. When other heroes in anime train, meditate, or find their inner power, Joseph's first instinct is to find the nearest blunt object and figure out how to turn it into a weapon. This is the guy who pulls out a pair of clackers, toy clackers, and turns them into one of the flashiest ripple techniques we've ever seen. And when that doesn't work, his next move is a Tommy gun on a vampire indoors. He doesn't hesitate, he just opens fire in a cramped room like he's an action star. That's Joseph in a nutshell. Everything becomes a weapon and everything becomes a performance. Joseph's fights feel like a stage where he's improvising lines as he goes along. One second he's hurling grenades with a grin, the next he's sprinting away shouting something outrageous only to swing back around with a trick no one saw coming. You can really feel Araki having fun writing him. The "your next line is" gag started as a joke, but it quickly became one of Araki's clearest experiments with mixing humor into serious fights, giving Joseph a verbal weapon that undercut his enemies while still driving the plot forward. He'd predict exactly what someone was about to say, repeat it back to them, and grin when they couldn't stop themselves from saying it anyway. It's comedy, but it's also psychological. Joseph disarms people by throwing them off balance, and Araki leans into that in every scene. And then there's the fights with the Pillar Men, where Joseph's improvisational brilliance is on full display. Facing Wamu, Joseph distracts him with sleight of hand, ties the antidote ring to a crossbow bolt, and turns what should have been a straightforward duel into a constant guessing game. Against Esdisi, he pulls off an even wilder move, bluffing, tricking, and at one point literally stealing the man's brain while the fight is still going on. And then there's the final showdown with cars. This is where most protagonists would power up, scream, and punch harder. Joseph, he throws a rock, then he panics. Then by a series of accidents and quick thinking escapes, he launches the ultimate life form into space with a trick that's half brilliant and half pure luck. Araki clearly leaned into that thin line between genius and stupidity, making Joseph the kind of hero who could fail spectacularly and succeed even more spectacularly in the same breath. What makes Battle Tendency stand out even now is how Joseph redefined JoJo's fights. He made them clever, he made them funny, and most importantly, he made them unpredictable. It's been over a decade since I first watched this, but I vividly remember being completely lost every episode, never knowing what would happen next. You really never know what Joseph's going to pull out of his sleeve, and honestly, neither does he. That's what made every victory feel earned and every moment so memorable. Hey there, looks like you've been caught in Dio Stan the World. While time's frozen, don't forget to leave a like, drop a comment, and subscribe so you never miss any future content. Alright, time's up, back to the video. When Stardust Crusaders opens, it doesn't just introduce a new JoJo, it brings back an old one, and not just in a cameo. JosephJoestar walks back into the story decades after Battle Tendency, older, louder, and now proudly sporting one of the greatest anime dad outfits of all time. Bringing back Joseph wasn't just an accident. Araki made a rare choice for a shonen creator. He aged his hero. Most series keep their leads frozen in time, forever young. Joseph's return lets us see a JoJo who had changed, who carried the weight of age, and who could still matter in a story now driven by stans instead of hamen. From the first moment he appears, you realize Joseph hasn't been smoothed out by age, he's still cracking jokes, still talking big, and still finding out new ways to get in over his head. But now there's a twist. Joseph is a mentor. He's not the reckless teenager from part 2 anymore, he's the man the younger Joestar turns to for guidance. He teaches Jotaro about Hamon, explains what little he can about stands, and keeps the group moving forward even when the situation gets more bizarre by the day. Joseph didn't suddenly become a quiet, wise old man just because he got older. He's still Joseph. And that means his instincts haven't changed a bit. He's still the guy who'll get on a plane only for it to crash again. He still yells in disbelief when things go wrong. He still talks big, gets scared, and then pulls himself together with some last-second brilliance. And then there's his stand, Hermit Purple. At first glance, it's almost a joke. Purple vines that can swing him around or take spirit photos when smashed against a camera. Compared to Star Platinum's raw power or Hierophant Green's range, it feels like the weakest stand on the team. But Joseph turns it into a tool of pure ingenuity. Again, he uses it to swing between rooftops, rig up traps, channel Hamon through it, and even to deliver messages from beyond the grave. Joseph never stops finding ways to make Hermit Purple feel useful, proving that his creativity didn't fade with age. There's something seriously satisfying about watching Joseph in Stardust Crusaders. Araki gave us the rare gift of seeing a shonen protagonist grow older without losing what made him special. He's older, slower, sometimes out of his depth with the new rules of stands, and yet he's still in the fight. Every trip up, every clever workaround, every over-the-top yell reminds you this is still JosephJoestar, just in a different chapter of his life. That mix of mentorship and mischief makes his second act so memorable. He doesn't overshadow Jotaro, but he doesn't fade into the background either. He's the glue that holds the group together, the comic relief that never feels cheap, and the reminder that sometimes experience is just as valuable as strength. By the time you've seen Joseph in both Battle Tendency and Stardust Crusaders, you realize something. There isn't just one version of him. He doesn't stay locked in to a single idea of what a JoJo should be. He bends, adapts, and he refuses to stay easily defined. Most protagonists, especially in long-running series, stay trapped in one role. They're the fighter, they're the leader, they're the comic relief. Joseph somehow manages to cycle through all of these and more, and he does it without losing the thread of who he is. As a young man, he was the loudmouth who used jokes as a weapon, and as an older man, he shifted into a mentor who guided the crew through dangerous territory. But even then, the prankster never disappeared. It just took on new forms, slipping out in his banter, his bluffs, and his stubborn way of doing things. That flexibility is why Joseph's personality has lasted so long. When Hamon stopped being the focus of the JoJo's world, he didn't get written out. Joseph is hard to define. He shifts roles constantly. One moment the loudest voice in the room, the next the person asking the right question when no one else will. You never quite know what version of him you're getting, and that's part of the appeal. He doesn't follow a set arc, he curves and bends around the narrative, reacting in ways that feel real rather than written. Araki lets him drift between tones, tragic, absurd, heroic, sometimes all in the same scene. That slipperiness is what keeps him from ever feeling boxed in. And every now and then, he'd still shout out the secret Joestar technique before bolting, just to remind everyone that his retreats were part of his charm. His reach doesn't end with part 3 either. His appearance in Diamond is Unbreakable is brief, but it leaves a mark. Joseph is revealed as Josuke's father, a revelation that reshapes the Joestar family line, aka Jotaro now has a grand uncle younger than him. But by this point, Jotaro is now fully leading the charge in the story, but Joseph's shadow still lingers, connecting what came before to what's happening now. Araki's hand is visible in all of this. Joseph's adaptability reflects the way the series itself keeps shifting. From Hamon to stands, from gothic horror to globetrotting adventure, and Joseph was the one character who could move with it. Joseph's greatest strength is that he fits anywhere, whether he's a teenager bluffing gods, a grandpa mentoring stand users, or an old man whose legacy literally shapes the next protagonist. He leaves an imprint. Every version of him feels like the same JosephJoestar, just at a new stage of his life. And in a series where characters often burn bright and disappear, Joseph lingers. When you look at everything JosephJoestar brought to JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, it's hard to imagine the series without him. He wasn't just another protagonist slotted into the Joestar bloodline, he redefined what a JoJo could be. He made the fights clever, made the humor sharper, and he added a sense of unpredictability that never left the franchise after him. Joseph is the Joestar who could grow up without losing his spark. We met him as a teenager who would bluff ancient warriors and pull clackers out of nowhere. Decades later, we saw him as an older man, still screaming, still improvising, and even turning these smallest tools into something useful. Very few anime characters get that kind of arc, where you watch them stumble, adapt, and move forward across their entire life. And then there's the way he made even his panic iconic. Joseph's exaggerated shouts of turned moments of surprise into legendary memes, echoing through anime fandom long after the scenes themselves ended. That single yell captures him perfectly, terrified one second, dramatic the next, and plotting his next move before the echo fades. Even when the spotlight moved on, when Jotaro was leading the fight and the series had shifted into the new eras, Joseph's presence lingered. As a mentor, as a link between generations, and even the father of the next JoJo, he tied the story together in ways no one else could. JosephJoestar was the brilliant idiot, the prankster hero, and the man who somehow managed to turn every fight into something unforgettable. And behind it all was Hirohiko Araki, a creator unafraid to age his hero, twist his own formula, and write a JoJo who could be clever, funny, and endearing all at once. No matter which JoJo you call your favorite, Joseph will always be the one who found a way to surprise you and make you laugh while saving the day. Catch you in the next one.